Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Before I start, something I was, one of the nice things about office hours is that you get to talk to people and you get to hear kind of like different things. And one of the things that I was reminded of today is the particular challenge of culture in Islam. The thing is that if we understand religious teachings properly, we understand fiqh properly, then we get what we have in the world. What we have in the world is that you have many different places where Islam has existed for a long time. And the way that Islam is lived and practiced in those places is relevant to those places, right? Like it's connected to those places. It's based on the culture of those places. You don't expect, for example, that if you go to Pakistan, that you're going to get like a Lebanese flavor of Islam in Pakistan. It wouldn't make any sense, right? It would be really weird, actually. It'd be like, what is going on here? And if you went to Egypt, you wouldn't expect Islam in Egypt to look like Islam in Southeast Asia, for example, right? Yet when we come to America, we have this interesting phenomenon. And that phenomenon, but it's still Islam, just to be clear, right? It's not just like these people and these cultures are clearly Muslim people and they're clearly Muslim cultures. And that, of course, takes time. But when we come to America, we have this phenomenon of like Islam in America has to look like something else somewhere else. And if it doesn't look like that, then it's not authentic. And there's a imam that I know who's someone that I hold in very high regard, and I think is someone, very special. And usually, some of us are from this place, but our roots were somewhere else. Some of us were actually from somewhere else. We're in this place. Some of us were in this place and we're from this place, and our roots are in this place. So each person is slightly different, and everyone doesn't have to be the same, right? I don't expect, as much as I want Islam in America to respect and understand America, I don't expect people who have different cultural backgrounds to leave those things, right? Like you shouldn't stop being whoever you are because you came to this country. And at the same time, we have to respect the realities of the place that we live in. And different places in this country are very different. Like even in the same city, the suburbs and the inner city can be very different. Culture can be extremely different, just down the street. So just reminded of that, and that, like obviously it comes up all the time. I spent a good portion of my adult life in Egypt, and I love Egypt, and Egypt is like a second home to me. But I wouldn't expect people who are trying to learn from me to become Egyptian. You know, I don't expect them to do the things that I did when I lived there, and I don't expect myself to do things that I did when I lived there. But I also will bring things there that, at the same time, we should recognize that sometimes cultures need to be worked with, and the best of them needs to be brought out. And our default is not always what is the best from that place. And so, may Allah help us and may Allah guide us. And also that in community life, not everyone is the same, right? Like some people are going to play scholarly roles, some people are going to play spiritual roles, some people are going to play intellectual roles, some people are going to be professors, some people are going to be business people, some people are going to be this, that, whatever else it might be. Some people are going to drive Uber. Everyone's going to do something different, right? And one of the things that I think all of the teachers in the Majlis would agree upon is that our goal in teaching is not to make people copies of ourselves. Our goal in teaching is to lay out the necessary parameters that help a person to be able to figure out who they are, not to become me. I would hate for any of my students to become me, or anyone. Don't become me, become you. Right? That's the goal. Is to understand myself enough that I can figure out who I am, and what I'm going to do, and what that's going to look like, and so on. And of course, we benefit from people, you know. We benefit from whoever we can. But in the end, that's one of the beautiful things about the spiritual journey, and one of the reasons why we find Islam to be very universal in all of these places, is because in the end, it's about the human being and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And and so uh, and so the paths to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are as numerous as the breaths that people take. You know, people will do their own thing. Allah help us. And we should ask ourselves, who am I? You know, who am I? And that's like many good questions, they're really simple and they're really complicated at the same time. You know, it's like when someone asks about qadr, it's like, okay, well, that's really simple and really complicated. Who am I is also really simple and really complicated. You know, it's we are who we are, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to see who we are, and to fully understand who we are and who we can be, and what is the best in us, and to be able to bring all of those things together, right? Because every one of us is compiled of many different experiences and circumstances and influences and all kinds of things. And what Shaitan wants is for us to believe that all of those things are contradictory and that they're pulling us in different directions. And I'm just so confused. And that's not actually what it has to be. And inshallah, you know, every single one of us, with all the things that we've been through, there's a way for all of that to come together. And that's, you know, when that comes together, then inshallah we will be very strong. And that's what Allah wants from us. So, Allahumma wafiqna ya Rabbi ila ma tuhibbuhu wa tarda. We left off with the author saying the following. قال رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا الله وإياه بعلومه في الدارين آمين. واعلم أن العاقل لما صح علمه وثبت يقينه علم أنه لا ينجيه من ربه إلا الصدق. Did we do this? No, I don't think we did. I think we فسعى في طلبه وبحث عن أخلاق أهله رغبة في أن يحيا قبل مماته ليستعد لدار الخلود بعد وفاته وباع نفسه وماله من ربه حيث سمعه يقول إن الله اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم وأموالهم بأن لهم الجنة. Subhan Allah. Every week, at least for me, every week I come, it's the same. I'm like, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. You know, Imam Al-Muhasibi, he's ajib. He said, know that the aqil, the person of intellect, which we've gone over many times now, the person of intellect, when their knowledge is sound and their certainty is fixed. Okay? So now they're a person who has this intellect, and the knowledge that they have is sound. And the certainty they have in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so on is firm. Then when that happens to them, they know 100% true knowledge that nothing will save them from their Lord except a sidq. Nothing will save them except a sidq. A sidq, again, you know, it's one of these terms that's difficult to translate, and it's important to just know in and of itself. Sidq. Sidq is, you know, to be fully real, to be fully true, to have full integrity. for everything to align, everything to match up, everything to be honest. That with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is what it is. It's just me and you, Allah. And so he knows that he or she knows that this is the thing. And this is what we want. We want our religion to move past slogans. Right? A lot of times our religious experience is basically a bunch of slogans. There's this thing, there's that thing, and then, or sometimes like a bunch of arguments that are also slogans, right? Like, where I'm arguing for this side today. Now this person, they read some things, they argue for the other side. And then and there's like, I want to submit this person, subject them to this position and get them to accept it. And okay, well, and then what? Okay, fine, they accepted your position, or you accepted your position, or this or that, or whatever else it might be. Okay, what? Why? Was it so that I can be real with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or was it just so that someone could be on my side or my team, or I can feel good about myself, or whatever else it might be? So they know that if I'm this person, that they attain these qualities, they know I want to be good with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have to find sidq. I have to find sidq. So what do? Sa'a fi talabihi. The person puts in, they hasten towards seeking it. They run seeking it. They put effort in seeking it. They're like when لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى, that the person has nothing except what they put forward. I have this. You only live once. I only have this life, and I'm going to put forth what I can with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they seek that, and they وَبَحَثَ عَنْ أَخْلَاقِ أَهْلِهِ رَغْبَةً فِي أَنْ يَحْيَا قَبْلَ مَمَاتِهِ. He says, so they seek this sidq, and they struggle and they put effort in seeking it and looking for it and searching for the character of its people. Searching for the character of the people of sidq. I want to find them, right? And why do they do that? Out of their hope that they will live before they die. Their hope that they will live before they die. Because everything else is, if it's not real, it's not real, right? If it's not real, then what was it actually? It didn't actually mean much. So they want to live before they die. He says, Shaykh Abu Ghudda in the footnote, he says, Rahimahullah ta'ala wa nafa'allahu bi بأن يذكر في حياته بالخير في عداد أهله الصالحين بصدقه وأمانته ودينه وحسن سيرته. He says this means that the person will be remembered in their life before they die, even though be remembered while they're alive as being a person who was a person of righteousness, a person who was good, a person who was from the righteous people, a person who had sidq, a person who was trustworthy, who was upright in their character and in their deen, And if they're able to do that before they pass away, then that's a great thing, They lived a good life. They had their life ahead of them. And they really spent it in something that was good. لِيَسْتَعِدَّ لِدَارِ الْخُلُودِ بَعْدَ وَفَاتِهِ, so that he or she can be ready for the everlasting life after they pass away. And because they have this realization and this understanding, then they sell themselves and their wealth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they heard Allah say in the Quran, verily Allah has purchased from the believers themselves and their wealth in recompense that theirs is Jannah. That's what they get in recompense. The believer says, I give my life to you, Allah. I give my wealth to you, Allah. And Allah says, your reward is paradise. Okay? So they have this understanding, and then they try to do that. I think one of the operative words here is they sa'a, and bahatha. They set out and they put that effort in and they search for it. And they don't give up. Sa'i has like a connotation in a sense. Actually, I think that this idea of sa'i is an important metaphor or symbol in the life of the believer. And what's one of the most important rituals that we have is the ritual of doing sa'i between Safa and Marwa, right? We do this sa'i, this traveling between Safa and Marwa. It's two mounts. When we go to Umrah or we go to Hajj, So we do, right? And it goes back to Sayyidah Hajar, that she was with Ismail alayhi salam and they were in the desert and she put this effort in. She didn't know, like, is it going to work? Is it not going to work? Where is the answer going to come from? Where is the support going to come from? Nothing was guaranteed for her, alayhi salam, right? But she made the effort. And when she made the effort, Subhan Allah, things opened up for her. And it doesn't necessarily, she didn't like do one of them and say, okay, where is it? Do two of them and say, where she went, and she went, and she went. Sometimes it doesn't. We don't know when it comes. SubhanAllah. And this is true for little things, it's true for big things. I was telling people this morning that, it's true for little things, it's true for big things. That Allah, in the books of spirituality, they always use this term of futuhat. The person has openings. There's openings associated with different things. Actually, the openings are happening all the time. A person might pray for 20 years, they don't feel much from it. And then something just changes and they feel something in their prayer. It's opening from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or maybe it becomes a little bit better, it becomes a little bit stronger. Maybe they're going through difficulty, maybe things are alleviated. All kinds of openings are happening all the time. It's difficult. We have to try to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فعلم بعد الجهل واستغنى بعد الفقر وأنس بعد الوحشة وقرب بعد البعد واستراح بعد التعب فاتنف أمره واجتمع همه وصارت التقوى شعاره والمراقبة حاله. He said, so then that person, they know after being ignorant, and they become like sufficed in themselves after being impoverished. It's not necessarily a matter of wealth, right? It's a matter of this need internally. Sometimes we have internal needs, just unfulfilled. So they became fulfilled after being unfulfilled. And they felt the opposite of lonely. What's the opposite of lonely? Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know. Interesting, huh? Anisa ba'd al-wahsha. In Arabic, of course, you have a million words for everything. And it makes perfect sense and it feels so good and right. In English, you can't figure it out. I don't know. They have, like, uns is that feeling of like love and closeness. Ideally, you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also we can have with people sometimes, right? Actually, people always talk about insan being related to forgetfulness. Actually, insan is more closely related to uns. The human being is created to have that feeling with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they went through maybe a period where they felt this scatteredness, this loneliness, and now all of it's gone. And they're just happy and at peace. They're with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they become close after being far. And they become they become at ease after being exhausted. And so because of that, all of their affair becomes unified. And all of their concerns, their internal world, subhanAllah, is what I was talking about in the beginning. Their internal world comes together. That's jama'. We use this also in the spiritual books. It's an interesting term, actually. That the person, when they attain something really good, they get jama'. Jama'. Jama' means when something comes together, right? So it means like the internal life of the person can become very scattered, right? But when the person becomes right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then everything comes together. All of their emotions all come together. And all of their psychology all comes together. And all of their spirituality all comes together. And all of their knowledge all comes together. And everything now becomes clear. So he says, وَاجْتَمَعَ هَمُّهُمْ. And all of their concerns become one, but not in a bad way. Like it becomes, they have this direction to them. They're subhanAllah. وَصَارَتِ التَّقْوَى شِعَارُهُ. And taqwa becomes that becomes their banner. Their banner or their slogan becomes taqwa. That's what's guiding them and leading them in everything. وَالْمُرَاقَبَةُ حَالَهُ. And their constant state is that they're in a state of muraqabah. They have this muraqabah as like a presence of heart and soul with the reality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is observing and watching. So Allah is watching and I'm watching myself But I have this, I'm watching myself with Allah. So that becomes how they live their life. ألا ترى لقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. He said, do you not see the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم where he said, worship Allah as if you see him. And if you do not see him, he sees you. If you do not see him, he sees you. It's a very interesting expression. إن لم تكن تراه. It seems to indicate you could have some sort of vision in a sense. Some sort of witnessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يحسبه الجاهل سميتا عيا. سبحان الله. يحسبه الجاهل سميتا عيا وحكمته أصمتته. He says that the ignorant person will look at this person that he's describing. The ignorant person will look at this person who he's describing, and they'll think that that person is mute. That's the word, right? Mute, like when someone can't speak. They'll think that they're mute, and they'll think that they're sick. Something's wrong with that. What's wrong with this person? They don't speak. Everyone else is speaking, they don't speak. What's wrong with that? And then he says, وَحِكْمَتُهُ أَصْمَتَتْهُ. And this individual's wisdom caused them to go silent. Their wisdom caused them to go silent. It's not because they didn't have anything. It reminds me of this story that's always mentioned of Shaykh Al-Hasan Al-Shadhili radiallahu ta'ala anhu. I believe it was when they were going out to battle even with the Crusaders. And they were in a tent together. You know, him, Shaykh Al-Hasan, and Al-Izz ibn Abd al-Salam, Sultan al-Ulama. Who else was there? A couple of other big names were there. They're all, subhanAllah, going to jihad. They're all big names. They're all together, right? And they're sitting down and they're talking about something, and every one of them spoke. These are like the biggest ulama of their time, you know? Every one of them spoke. Shaykh Al-Hasan was silent. And then after everyone spoke, they said, Shaykh, we want to hear from you. He said, what is there to say? The ulama, they've already spoken, people have already spoken. So, like, no, we really want to hear from you. And he said, then he began to speak, and he spoke and he said things that had insights and reflections that none of them had anything near what he had to say. And then they were like, okay, now this is knowledge. This is the real knowledge right here. And but his initial response was that he was really quiet. You know Shaykh Sha'rawi, Himullah, the famous Shaykh Sha'rawi, the scholar and commentator on the Quran. You know, I think for people who knew and experienced Shaykh Sha'rawi, they understand. But if you weren't like from the Arab world, you didn't experience that in some sort of way, I don't think people understand like what Shaykh Sha'rawi was, in a sense, you know, rahimahullah. And I think younger people also don't understand because they don't know that world even. They don't know a world where you don't watch things on demand. You know? Like we know that world. If you wanted to watch something, you had to catch it, you know? And if you missed the Sunday morning cartoons at 9 a.m., that was the episode for the week. You missed it. You're going to be a loser at school all week because you didn't know what happened in that episode, you know? So this was like, there was a time when if you wanted to see something, you caught it at that time, and there was no alternative. Shaykh Sha'rawi was in that time, right? And his tafsir lesson that he would teach was on Friday, you know, in the afternoon on Friday. And literally, like, Egypt would just stop. Like the country would like shut down because everyone's watching Shaykh Sha'rawi. It was that like influential and powerful. Everyone was just like, the whole thing would shut down, you know. And you just watch, I mean, the recordings are incredible. It's really like, there is someone who grew up with him. And he said that what we saw from him all of his life was that he would be in a gathering and he would be the most knowledgeable person in the gathering, and he'd be the last person to say anything. And he'd never speak, he wouldn't have anything to say. He would just be with the people, you know. And the person was saying, and I believe that's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him, you know, this position of being teaching, and when that happened, like late in his life, really, where he's doing that, then like everyone listened. You know, Allah turned the hearts of the people towards him. But many hours and hours and hours and hours of his life, he's sitting, not saying anything. You know, Sayyidina Luqman, who's obviously mentioned in the Quran, Luqman, um, you know, Luqman was black, by the way. Racism is not only a problem in America, but it's a uniquely bad problem in America. But Luqman was black, and a man came. He said, فَأَتَاهُ رَجُلٌ وَهُوَ فِي مَجْلِسِ أُنَاسٍ يُحَدِّثُهُم أي يعلمهم ويرشدهم فقال له ألست الذي كنت ترعى معي الغنم في مكان كذا وكذا. So this man came and he saw that Luqman is sitting and he's teaching and people are listening to him and stuff like that. And he said to Luqman, he said, aren't, aren't you the guy that like we used to shepherd together? Like, we used to be in the hillsides and there was a flock and like, we used to shepherd together. Aren't you him? You know, like what's going on here? He said, yeah, that's me. He said, and the man asked a smart question. He said, قال نعم. قال فما بلغ بك ما أرى. He said, yes, I'm that person. He said, so how am I seeing what I'm seeing right now? Right? How am I seeing what I'm seeing right now? And he said, صدق الحديث والصمت عما لا يعنيني. صدق الحديث والصمت عما لا يعنيني. He said, I was truthful in my speech and I stayed quiet about things that don't concern me. I was truthful in my speech. I stayed quiet about things that don't concern me. This is his whole answer. You know what it was? That's what it was. So look at this description. The ignorant person will look at this person and think they're foolish, think they have nothing to say, think they're not intelligent, think they don't have knowledge, think all of these things. And what is it that's caused them to be quiet is that they've attained actually really high levels of knowledge and wisdom and learning and understanding. Yeah. And that's why it's important, like one of the things that we learn when we read these books too is that it's important to learn how these people are so that we can also learn how we should be around them. Like, for example, if I'm around someone like this, I shouldn't expect that they're just gonna like share their opinion. I shouldn't assume that. Like, okay, five of us that are at a table and everyone's sharing their opinion and they're talking about something and everyone's having this conversation and this person is just sitting there. I mean, most likely they're a sheikh because it's like the behavior of sheikhs. And the sheikh is sitting there and he doesn't say anything. Everyone just has their conversation and gets up and leaves. Well, you missed out on a big opportunity to actually find out what did they think. But because nobody asked them, they didn't say anything. Right? They were like, I'm not gonna speak if I don't have to speak. So I just, you know, and that's because a lot of times they don't have to speak. It's not like sometimes something has to be said. If something actually has to be said, they'll say it for sure. But a lot of times something doesn't have to be said, so they just won't say anything. So if I don't know like how to be around it, or maybe they'll go along with things, but it's not actually what they want. It's halal, so they'll go along with it to make the people happy out of like, you know, serving them and make them happy. They want that, alhamdulillah, bismillah, we'll do that. But maybe it's not what they want. Yeah. So there's some sort of there's also a lesson in this to see how to be around people like that. يحسبه الأحمق مهذارا يحسبه الأحمق مهذارا والنصيحة لله أنتقته. Now the other side of it, right? I'm assuming mihdara. I don't know this word actually. Anyone know this word? Mihdara? Mihdara. I'm thinking it means that um, they're speaking too much. Can't leave this. I don't know how I didn't catch that. Um, let's find it. No, I don't want the English one. Give me the English one. Give me the Arabi one. Yeah, that one. Okay. صار من يكثر من الكلام الذي لا فائدة منه ومن يكثر من كلامه من الخطأ. Yeah. So basically, the person who doesn't, so one side of it, sometimes they'll be very quiet. Person will think they're sick or they're just can't talk or they don't have anything to say, right? And it's wisdom that kept them silent. The other side of it is that the stupid person, actually, an ahmaq, forgive me. Yeah, many of our cultures have the word ahmaq. It's a very colorful term. It can only be felt. It's not meant to be. It's one of those words, it has to be felt. Ahmaq, like you feel like there's a really unintelligent person. The ahmaq thinks that they're talking for no reason. They're just talking too much for no reason. وَالنَّصِيحَةُ لِلَّهِ أَنْتَقَتْهُ. And giving sound counsel and speaking for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what caused them to speak. So both sides, Sometimes a person will look at it, why are they talking so much? Because they're doing this out of sincerity and goodness for the people that they're talking to. And another time the person will think, well, how come they're not saying anything? Because out of wisdom, they're not saying anything. So they're both the situations. وَيَحْسَبُهُ غَنِيًّا وَتَعَفُّفُ أَغْنَاهُ وَيَحْسَبُهُ فَقِيرًا وَالتَّوَاضُعُ أَدْنَاهُ. And that one person will look at them and think that they're very wealthy. And they think that because they have so much temperance and humility in the way that they live, and not even humility, like basically patience over not ta'affuf. It's hard to translate. Iffa usually is related to like temperance, but Iffa, when related to not asking for money and stuff like that, is basically that they have like this patience and this forbearance, and they have this wealth of self. It says, وَالتَّعَفُّفُ أَغْنَاهُ. This character trait of being so like self-contented makes the person feel like they're actually very wealthy. Maybe they're not, but they would never say anything about it. They would never give you any indication that they have any sort of hardship or need or anything else. But that's out of their, so the person would think that they're very wealthy, and they're not, right? On the other side of it, وَيَحْسَبُهُ فَقِيرًا وَالتَّوَاضُعُ أَدْنَاهُ. Another person will look at them and think that they're poor, but it's just because they're so humble, right? They're so humble that they're not going to wear like really nice things, and they're not going to do, just take. So they have all of these qualities. The point is that if we're dealing with people, that we understand that they're people of taqwa, they're people of piety, and they're people of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should be careful about our immediate impressions. Sometimes our immediate impression might be one thing, but it might not actually, the reality might not actually be that thing. So we have to have this. And also it shows you complexity of these. I don't know if you feel this way, but to me, these things are so beautiful. It's really, I don't know why. I can't even explain to you why, but it's just so beautiful. لا يتعرض لما لا يعنيه ولا يتكلم فوق ما يكفيه ولا يأخذ ما ليس بمحتاج إليه ولا يدع ما وكل بحفظه الناس منه في راحة وهو من نفسه في تعب. قد أمات بالورع حرصه وحسم بالتقى طمعه وأطمع بنور العلم شهواته. رضي الله تعالى عنه. But then he says, فهكذا فكن ومثل هؤلاء فاصحب ولآثارهم فاتبع وبأخلاقهم فتأدب فهؤلاء الكنز المأمون بائعهم بالدنيا مغبون. I can't, it's amazing. They don't expose themselves to that which does not concern them. And they don't take upon themselves more than what is needed. And they don't take for themselves more than what they need. And they would never leave anything that has been given to them to be entrusted. People, with regards to them, are at ease. And they are, with regards to themselves, in exhaustion and exertion and fatigue, because when it comes to bettering themselves, they put all their effort into it. And so when people deal with them, the people have it easy with them. They have um, their vain ambitions have been put to death by their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by their wara'. And their taqwa has put an end to, it's kind of similar, their ambitions, their tama. I always struggle with how to translate tama. And then I get it, and then I forget it again. Yeah, like always wanting more. They're just always, ثُمَّ يَطْمَعُ أَنْ أَزِيدَ. Allah says that I gave him this, and I gave him this, and I gave him this, and I gave him this. ثُمَّ يَطْمَعُ أَنْ أَزِيدَ. Then they want me to give them more. Yeah, it's like a greediness, like a avarice. Yeah, but that's been taken care of because of their taqwa. And the light of knowledge has extinguished their desires. They have real knowledge, so everything else goes away. They don't have a desire for these things anymore. It's like, okay, I could spend 10 more minutes on something that I desire, or I can spend 10 minutes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The desires are gone, they're just with Allah, فَهَكَذَا فَكُونَ. This is, again, it's one of the biggest things about, I think, the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that is sometimes somehow we miss it. Like the simplicity of the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is something that really enables everything that he does, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he doesn't need anything. He doesn't need food. He doesn't need clothes. Even what he has from shelter is extremely simple. And he has community. What else is there? Like what are you gonna? Okay, one day hungry, one day not hungry, one day nice clothes, one day not nice clothes. One day he has something nice. The person comes to him, says, "Can I have this, Ya Rasulullah?" He knows the Prophet's going to give it to him, so he gives it to him. Gives him his cloak. It comes, it goes, it's gone. But because how can you control a person like that? How can you subjugate a person like that? How can you dominate a person like that? And you can't. They're already free. And so. Subhan Allah, it's amazing. فَهَكَذَا فَكُونَ. So be like that. He says, so like this, technically he says, for like this, so like this, be. It's different than be like that. Like this, be. And those kind of people keep their company and follow their footsteps and follow their character because they are the precious treasure. They are the precious treasure. And someone who sells being with people like that for some sort of worldly benefit, then they really lost out. That's what he says. And in the footnote he says, لو حصل الإنسان والدنيا وفاته صحبة هؤلاء فهو مغبون مخدوع في رضاه بالدنيا بدلا عنه وقد صدق رحمه الله تعالى. Shaykh Abdul says this. He says, if a person achieved every worldly benefit and they missed keeping the company of those kind of people, then they lost out. Because, and then Shaykh Abdul says, and he told the truth, rahimahullah. It says about Imam Al-Muhasibi, and he told the truth, rahimahullah. Someone mentioned to me recently that they heard something said about Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, rahimahullah. You know, those, of course, all of you know that Naama, or that just comes usually, may Allah accept her Umrah. She's the granddaughter of Shaykh Abdul Fattah. So Shaykh Abdul Fattah, rahimahullah, one of the things that was said about him was that if you didn't know who he was and you went into a gathering, then you just look for the person whose face is the most illuminated, and you know that's Shaykh Abu Ghudda. بكثرة الصلاة على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, because of how much salah he used to make on the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, how much service he did to the sunnah of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. So you just look for that, and you know, oh, that's Shaykh Abdul Fattah. Subhan Allah. And truly, if you see like videos and stuff, even in old videos, you can see it. If you look him up and like look up old pictures or videos, you're like, subhanallah, Allah really gave him a nur. So there will be at loss. وَهُمَ الْعُدَّةُ فِي الْبَلَاءِ. Ooh, that's important. Subhanallah. وَهُمَ الْعُدَّةُ فِي الْبَلَاءِ وَالتُّقَاةُ مِنَ الْأَخِلَّاءِ أَنْ افترقت أغنوك وإن دعوا الرب لم ينسوك أولئك حزب الله ألا إن حزب الله هم المفلحون. MashaAllah. He says they are the greatest support in times of trial. هم العدة في البلاء. They are the greatest support in times of trial. والتقاة من الأخلاء, and they are like the greatest again, support from amongst friends and protection amongst friends. If you leave them, they suffice you. Sorry, not if you leave them. If you are in need, they suffice you. And if they make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they don't forget you. أولئك حزب الله ألا إن حزب الله هم المفلحون. They are the party of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The party of Allah is successful. Party of Allah is successful. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad. MashaAllah. That's you guys. He wrote a whole book about you all. MashaAllah. It's so nice. What's our food situation? Oh, great. Well, finish it. وَعْلَمْ, he says, وَعْلَمْ وَسَّعَ اللَّهُ بِالْفَهْمِ قَلْبِي وَقَلْبَكَ وَأَنَارَ بِالْعِلْمِ صَدْرِي وَصَدْرَكَ وَجَمَعَ بِالْيَقِينِ هَمِّي وَهَمَّكَ. Ameen. Say Ameen. When Muhasibi is making dua for us, he says, no. Then he says, may Allah expand my heart and your heart by understanding, and give light to my chest and your chest through knowledge, and solidify my affairs and your affairs through certainty. He says, he starts by saying that أني وجدت أصل كل بلاء داخل على القلب ضرورة من نتائج الفضول وأصل ذلك الدخول في الدنيا بالجهل. يا لطيف. ونسيان المعاد بعد العلم. Yeah, maybe we should postpone this one. This one's a little bit scary. وأصل ذلك الدخول في الدنيا بالجهل ونسيان المعاد بعد العلم والنجاة من ذلك ترك كل مجهول في الورع وأخذ كل معلوم في اليقين. So he says, after all of that dua and everything, I found that the source of every trial that enters upon the heart necessarily is a result of uh, al-fudul. Al-fudul. Al-fudul is basically to, how do we explain this? I don't know a good translation for fudul. It's running into the same problem. The word fadl, we hear it all the time, right? The blessing of Allah. We usually translate it as like the blessing of Allah, the virtue of Allah, so on and so forth. What is fadl actually? Fadl is like if you had a cup, okay, and you filled the cup up, and then it gets to the brim, and you fill it up a little bit more, the water that spills over, that's fadl. Okay? It's ma yafdul, huh? 10. Okay. Fadl. So the fadl is what is left over. It comes over the top, right? When we talk about the fadl of Allah, so the blessings of Allah, the virtues of Allah, these things, because those are all, actually, Allah doesn't have to give us anything. Everything that He gives us is fadl, right? This is in a bad context. So the bad context of it is it's essentially like a foolishness. What's scary about this is we actually engage in a lot of foolishness. From the diseases of the tongue is fudul and kalam, and fudul, we just speak about things that don't need to be spoken about. We spend on things that don't need to be spent on. We use time on things that don't need to be spent time on. These are all things that they're not actually necessary. They're just extra for that water that's spilling over the top. So he's saying all of the things that enter into the heart from difficulties and trials and everything else, know that this is from fudul. I found that it's from fudul. And then he said, actually, let me read the footnote since we have 10 minutes. قلت الشيخ ابن فتاح حسين قلت ولقد صدق رحمه الله تعالى ومن هذا قال الإمام الحافظ المحدث الزاهد أبو سعيد بن الأعرابي أحمد بن محمد البصري الصوفي صاحب التصانيف وأحد رواة سنن أبي داود عنه المتوفى سنة 340 رحمه الله تعالى. He said the following. One of the nice things about reading Shaykh Abdul Fattah's books, by the way, is you get to meet so many of the ulama. Because they always put in the comments, so and so said this, so and so said this, so and so said this. This is who they were, even if it's a few words. So he says this, the so and so said the following. He is the Imam, the Hafiz, the Muhaddith, Zahid. So already you have, he's calling him Imam, he's calling him Hafiz. And this is a hadith issue, actually, not a Quran issue. Now that we became weak in Quran, it became a Quran issue. But Hafiz, as a technical term, was like someone who's memorized 100,000 hadith. This is an Hafiz, Muhaddith, scholar of the Hadith sciences. A Zahid, someone who turned away from worldly issues and was pious and so on. Abu Sa'id ibn al-Arabi, Ahmed ibn Muhammad. Al-Basri, who lived in Basra. Al-Sufi, who was known for his spiritual dedication. Sahib al-Tasanif, person who had written many books. Ahadu Ruwati Sunan Abu Dawud anhu. One of the people who narrated the Hadith collection of Abu Dawud from Abu Dawud. Okay, so now this is how he introduces him. You get all of this information about him. What did he say? Who died in 340 after Hijrah? He said the following. He said, "At-tasawwufu kulluhu tarkun fudul." By the way, to give some context to this, Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda was not someone who was known to be a Sufi, quote unquote. He has no problem quoting someone who's called a Sufi. Right? I just want you to understand the context of this. Actually, at some point, he was the head of the Islamic movement, Ikhwan al-Muslimin in Syria, and he was a great scholar in Muhaddith. He ran for political positions. He went to prison. He had a very amazing, interesting life, a very diverse person, But he quotes and he acknowledges that this is a reality. There's people in it. And he's calling this person a Sufi, who's the narrator of Sunan Abu Dawud. So one of the main books of Hadith, right? So again, we have to move past slogans. We have some very strange sloganeering in our community. We have to move past it. Well, that's what Sufis do. Okay. That's like about as useful as saying that's what white people do. I mean, who are you talking about exactly? Because I know some really good white people. Alhamdulillah, Several of them are sitting in this room. Some of them are in my house, gave birth to me. You know, like there's some good white people in the world. That's what this do. That's what that do. Okay, you're gonna have to be more specific than that. We're not like say what you mean. Speaking of what I always say, right? My mom's statement: say what you mean and mean what you say. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Oh, the Sufis do that. Say what you mean. What do you mean actually? What are you trying to say? You know, خليك عاقل شوية. Like be a person who has their brain works a little bit. He says التصوف كله ترك الفضول والمعرفة كلها الاعتراف بالجهل والزهد كله أخذ ما لا بد منه والمعاملة كلها استعمال الأولى فالأولى والرضا كله ترك الاعتراض والعافية كلها سقوط التكلف بلا تكلف. يا لطيف, what a statement. Subhan Allah. Wow. He said, تصوف كله ترك الفضول. The spiritual path in its entirety is to leave these extra things. Leave the fudul. Leave the extra things. And knowledge, all of it, is to acknowledge one's ignorance. All of the knowledge is to acknowledge one's ignorance. And then he says, and asceticism, all of it, is taking what you have to take. Like you see how there's a theme to what he's saying, right? So what does it mean? Zuhud is usually what? Zuhud is you leave everything. So what does it mean to leave everything? To take what you have to take. That's you take just what you have to take. There's no fudul. And then and like the everyday interaction with people and with our lives is to use that which is to engage that which is the best thing, and then the next best thing, the next person, the highest priority. How do we deal with people? You deal with the highest priority, then the next priority, then the next priority. And contentment, all of contentment, is in leaving off objecting to the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever it is. Al-i'tirad. This is an i'tirad used like this is related to the decree of Allah. The person doesn't object to the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Shaykh Abdul Jilani radiallahu anhu, he said that al-i'tiradu ala al-haqqi and nuzul al-aqdari mawt ad-din, mawt at-tawheed, al-tawakkul wal-ikhlas. That to object to the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it occurs, it's the death of your deen. And it's the death of belief in Allah, it's the death of sincerity, it's the death of... So Shaykh Abdul Qadir is very strong. So he said that this is what it means to have contentment. وَالْعَافِيَةُ كُلُّهَا سُقُوطُ التَّكَلُّفِ بِلَا تَكَلُّفٍ. And comprehensive well-being in its entirety. Probably sometimes these really classical things are best translated with slang expressions. I don't know why. They really make sense when you say it in kind of like a different way. So how does one attain that? They leave off being extra without being extra. You get it? You know, like when you say to someone, so and so, they're being extra. They leave off being extra without being extra. It makes sense. You're like, Subhan Allah, now I get it. They leave off like overdoing it without overdoing it. Right? It's an amazing expression. SubhanAllah. So this is fudul. وَأَصْلُ ذَلِكَ. Okay, so now what's the issue? It says, where do all these problems in the heart come from? They come from fudul. Now he's going to say, where does this fudul come from? It comes from الدخول في الدنيا بالجهل والنسيان المعادي بعد العلم. He said it is to enter upon worldly affairs with ignorance. We have worldly affairs, right? We have to do jobs, we have to do work, some people will do all of their work, all of their worldly affairs, bring all of their income, take all of their responsibilities without any attention to whether or not it's halal. He says this issue brings about all of these issues. وَالنِّسْيَانَ الْمَعَادِ بَعْدَ الْعِلْمِ. And they're forgetting that they're going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after they knew that they're going back to Allah. They forgot that they're going back to Allah when they know that they're going back to Allah. So even though they know it, they're not paying attention to it. And even though it's something that they're busy with all the time, they're not paying attention to it. Like I'm busy with my work all the time. Shouldn't I be concerned about whether or not my work is halal? As again, the Muslim American community, interesting priorities. Everyone's busy with all kinds of things. You know the thing that you do every single day? Pray. We should know, like, am I actually praying properly? Is my prayer actually sound? Am I making it? Every day I go to the restroom. Do I know how to clean myself after I use the restroom such that my prayer is sound? This is a big issue. Hopefully we do, inshallah. Inshallah we do. But what I'm saying is, like, it's amazing that sometimes we just don't think about it. Yeah, but yeah, I don't want, it's boring and it's difficult. It's gonna take you like 5 hours maximum. If we want to do it the long way, it'll take you 5 hours, 10 hours maybe. Okay, every day of your life, like 30 years I'm doing this thing, 40 years I'm doing this. Take the 5, 10 hours. Let's figure it out, you know. Subhan Allah. وَالنَّجَاةُ مِنْ ذَلِكَ تَرْكُ كُلِّ مَجْهُولٍ فِي الْوَرَعِ. And he says, and the way to be saved from that is to leave things that we're ignorant about, like their ruling, leave those things out of taqwa, out of wara. And to take everything that is known with certainty. So if you know this thing is okay and it's good, take it. Don't hesitate. And you're not sure if it's okay and it's good, leave it. And this in itself will start to sort out all kinds of other things. Then there's a story of Abu Hanifa here. We'll finish with it. And Imam Al-Azam, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. We'll finish with it. We might come back to it next time. It says that Imam Abu Hanifa, another thing you learn when you read Abu Ghudda, not only the authors, you learn the books too. SubhanAllah, look what he says. He says, how excellent is this example of Imam Abu Hanifa? And then he says, the great scholar Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, who's different than Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, by the way. Ibn Hajar al-Haytami and Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani are two different people. Usually you can kind of know by context. If they don't tell you who's who, usually you know by context. Also, usually if it's Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, they'll say Ibn Hajar al-Haytami. And if it's Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, they might just say Ibn Hajar, because he's the more, like, prominent one, Although they were both really, really great scholars. So Ibn Hajar al-Haytami says in his book, Al-Khayrat al-Hisan fi Manaqibi al-Imam Abi Hanifa al-Nu'man. He was a Shafi'i too, he wrote this book, subhanAllah. So it just tells you this book that he wrote on Abu Hanifa on page 34, or 43, he says the following. That Abu Hanifa sent to his business partner some garments, and one of them was a piece of clothing or a garment that had a fault in it. And he told his business partner, sell these things and make sure that you bring to the people's attention that there's a fault in this garment, right? You don't sell this, it's a faulty piece, you don't sell it without them knowing it, okay? And so his business partner sold it, and he didn't make clear that this fault was in the garment because he forgot. And the person who bought it didn't recognize it. They didn't notice. فلما علم أبو حنيفة تصدق بثمن المتاع كله. So when Abu Hanifa found out about this, he donated all the money that came from that garment. Give it all in charity. It's like, I can't take this money. وكانت 30,000 dirham. And it was 30,000 dirhams. It's a very expensive piece of garment. وفاصل شريكه أي فارقه. And he stopped doing business with this person. His business partner, he no longer did business with this person. He's like, he's not paying attention enough. You can't fall into these things. There's a lot of stories like that. The way Abu Hanifa did business, I'm sure there's books written on it. It would be interesting. Just small little book. Anyone should do it. Hajj is good. It's all your free time. Someone should do it. One of the students, it's a good student of knowledge books, right? Look in the stories of Abu Hanifa, find like all the stories of how he did business and just make like a little 2, 3, 4, 5 page thing. It would be really beautiful if it hasn't been done already. هذا وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Alhamdulillah. Any questions or comments anyone has? We have dinner. Inshallah.
The trial is, does that mean that if you shut up and don't overspend and don't participate in al-qudud, you don't have any trial?
So he said, every trial that enters the heart. The question was, he's saying that if you leave all this fudul, and you really did that, and he's saying that the trials come from the fudul. So if you really left all this fudul, does it mean like you're not going to have any trials? And he said that every trial that comes on the heart, number one. So you might have trials, but just won't affect the heart of the person. And that's because the spiritual discipline that comes from doing that would make the person's heart so strong. It's not easy to do. Right? Like even if, okay, I get my finances in order. I don't spend on things I shouldn't spend on. Even if I was to get my time in order and I wasn't spending my time on things I shouldn't spend my time on. Even if I was to get my speech in order, that one's really hard. Get the speech in order, and I'm not talking about things I shouldn't be talking about. You know what's going to come up next. Really hard. How am I going to get myself to not think about things I shouldn't be thinking about? So we do that a lot. Like we go down, we're just sitting and we go down a road, and like next thing you know, we traveled 2 days journey into like something that really we didn't really need to spend a whole lot of time thinking about that. And Subhan Allah, you see this from great teachers. You see this actually. Um, it's like there was something we were thinking about doing. I'll keep it very general. Something we were thinking about doing. I could go somewhere, deal with some sort of situation or whatever. It's like I could sit here and theorize about all of the different possible scenarios that this whole thing could go, and this could happen, and that can happen, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I just have to go and do this thing. And when I get in this situation, it's going to become clear what the situation demands, and so on and so forth. And it's very common to just sit and think about all those things. I don't need to think about all those things. You don't have an issue like with someone. Okay, should I do this? Should I do that? What if this happens? What if that happens? None of it actually matters. It matters that I have this thing that I have to do. I just go do it. Tawakkal ala Allah. It's hard. But imagine a person does all of that discipline. Then probably their heart is going to be very stable. It's going to be very strong. They'll be like a mountain. That's why Dr. Umar Hafidhullah, Dr. Umar Farooq Abdullah, he always says that the awliya are like mountains. The people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're like mountains. And he says, and mountains don't need anchors. So strong. Yeah, Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam. Of course, life is life. There's always going to be things that are going to be upsetting. There's always things that are going to be, we're not going to turn into like cyborgs. Actually, we wouldn't be strong if we did that. So the Prophet ﷺ did what? His son died. He cried. He said, Ya Rasulullah, you cry, isn't it qadr? He said, it's qadr. إن القلب لا يحزن وإن العين لا تدمع ولا نقول إلا ما يرضي الله. Says the heart is grieved and the eye sheds tears, and we only say that which is pleasing to Allah. And that's the heart feeling imagine, the heart is feeling everything, but it's still strong. So it's not that it didn't feel those things. So it's not tested by it in the same way, but like you feel it. Just because someone feels sadness doesn't mean that they're going through a trial, in a sense. Like it's not like just because they feel frustration, or if it leads to certain things, obviously it's problematic. But someone's family member dies and they feel grieved by it, they're supposed to feel grieved by it. That doesn't mean that they had like maybe some issue of fudul or something. No. So, Allahu a'lam. Which sounds good. So may Allah bless Marcus and may Allah bless the volunteers and everyone who cooks, and may Allah give them all good in their life and facilitate for them all difficulties, and may they always be sufficed from any difficulty and any harm and any hardship. Allahumma ameen. We always say Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, he said, فَتَّشْتُ الْأَعْمَالِ كُلَّهَا وَلَمْ أَجِدْ خَيْرًا مِنْ إِطْعَامِ الطَّعَامِ. So I searched through all of the deeds and I didn't find anything that was better than feeding people. This is a great sunnah of the Muslims that, we've lost, and we get it back. We should have, I was told in the subcontinent they used to have, and probably they still have these, I think it's called lunga or something like this. Is that the word? It's like a food hall where anyone can eat. Langar. Langar. It's food always. So why can't we do that? People are like, well, it's not good business. Medical business, like everything has to be good business. There's too much good business stuff. Well, you guys should charge. People said that to us. They say that to us all the time. But like, you should bring like a coffee cart and sell coffee. People would pay for coffee, and then you guys can make a little bit of money. Yeah, and then we wouldn't be giving them drinks out of like Kadam, and then we'd just be like, well, we just have to sell everything so that like, I. So it's not good business. It's not good business. You're right. Our purpose is not always to do like good business. Our purpose is to do good. He said, I found all the good. Shaykh Abdul Qadir, literally, they had fields. Like people gave him fields and stuff. They grow the food. They make the food. They bring him bread every single day, and he'd give it out to everyone. And like, they've been like, well, let's make it into this. And then, I don't know. Like theoretically speaking, if someone owns like 10 restaurants, could probably manage to make one of them free. Okay, you're crazy. I said, I'm crazy, but you know business. So figure out how it works, You figure it out. It's not me to figure it out. But I think it can work. We did it. I said, it's not like Muslims didn't do these things. Muslims did these things. They told me up to today, and if you go to like in Lahore, what's it? Oh yeah, Sidi Ali Hajwari is buried. What do they call him? Dada Baksh, I think. They told me like endless people are given food every single day up to today at Dada Baksh. Because that's how he lived his life. He was a righteous person. He fed people all the time, so on and so forth. He died hundreds of years ago. Every day up to everyone's fed. SubhanAllah, you know. We can do it. We can do a lot. We have to believe in ourselves and be like, we can do a lot. We can do a lot, inshallah. And this community in particular can do a lot in Southern California. Southern California can do a whole, we have resources and talent and abilities and sincerity here that is incredible. So may our community do a lot, inshallah. May we figure out who we are and when we figure that out, may it be the clearest sign to the truth of Islam. But it cannot be like it's just too clear. Well, this thing is the truth. If the Mormons can do it, we can do it. SubhanAllah, I'm serious, like look at what the Mormons do, it's unbelievable. It's really amazing. SubhanAllah, the khairat that they do, may Allah guide them. You never know, maybe some great wali Allah will come to America and all the Mormons will convert. You never know. They do amazing work. SubhanAllah. It's not like it sounds crazy, but like this is actually, these kind of things happen in Muslim history. Some great person came, they were like, yeah, you know what? I think we'll all just convert. Boom, whole thing changes. All of the things. So it happens. SubhanAllah. It's the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing that can overcome it. It overcomes. That's it. Anyways. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى ومستنا بصدقك جميعا ومستنا بصدقك جميعا اللهم إنا نسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في الدنيا والآخرة. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم انصر إخواننا في فلسطين، اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان، افتح علينا فتح عليم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا صالحا. اللهم تقبل منا وعفو عنا وآتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم، والحمد لله رب العالمين. بارك الله فيك. الهنا والشفاء. May you be a blessed meal filled with healing and good health. Amen. قوموا إلى الطعام. قوموا إلى الطعام. الله. How are you, Sini?